Hey everyone, happy Wednesday and welcome to today's Hoboken Free Church Devotional. Thanks for joining us. I hope everything's going well as we continue into the last week in January and nearly to February. Today I'm going to be reading from Paul's letter to the Colossians, specifically chapter 3, verses 1 to 11, where he talks about keeping our focus on things above while ridding ourselves of all kinds of sin. So I'll read through that here in a moment and then walk through the passage. So here's today's section. Colossians 3, 1 to 11. Put on the new self. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked, when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its Creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, or free, but Christ is all and in all. So there's a lot to go through this passage, but we'll try and break things down a little bit. And I think it's really a great section where Paul gives a good distinction between talking about our old selves, our old ways of life, our old sins, our old actions, versus our new selves and how we should behave in this new self now that we're created to live and to dwell with Christ. So in the first several verses, Paul is talking about this new self, saying that if we've been raised with Christ, we must keep our focus on things that are above. And he reminds us that we've died to our earthly sins, and that since our life is now with Christ, not with this world, we've got to keep our focus where he is seated at the right hand of God. I really like verse 2, where it says we should set our minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. And that's a really good just sort of reality check for me and what I'm doing or thinking about, and making sure that I'm keeping my thoughts towards what is heavenly rather than what's earthly. I also like that Christ is described as our life here by Paul. And he says that we will be revealed with Christ in our glory, in his glory, when Christ returns to earth. So then in verse 5, Paul also continues by saying, put to death whatever therefore is earthly in you. And that's, again, due to our relation with Christ, we must treat the parts of our body as dead to all these manner of sins that he's described, which he equates to idolatry. And he's clearly saying, we must put these sins to death because they're so serious and so divisive between us and God that we have to rid ourselves completely of them. And in fact, he says explicitly that God is coming with his wrath due to these sins of passion that he lists before. So while we once walked in these things as sinners, we're no longer to be held captive by them, and so we must ensure that we're avoiding them at all costs. And just to kind of look through some of the phrasing or the verb tenses here, we must put them in the past tense, right? Paul says we were living in them, but no longer. So that's clearly saying this was a time from the past, and presently we're not to be living in those sins anymore. If we then go to verse 8, he continues by saying that we must rid ourselves of even more sins, of anger, of wrath, malice, slander, and of speech. We mustn't keep on to these old things, but keep the old self away and put on the new self, again as the true image of the one who created us. And again, looking at the verb tenses here, right, he's saying we are being renewed. So it's a present progressive. So it's not that we are renewed and we're done and that's all that it takes, but we're still working through things daily by our Creator. And again, I think for me that's a good reminder that this is still a continual process where we're not going to get things right all the time. But as long as we keep working and keep trying to improve ourselves and become more Christ-like every day, that really is the process of being renewed continually. And then in the last verse, Paul says that we can be renewed in Christ, where there is no race, there's no class, no nationality, no status of any kind. All that matters is that we are created like Christ and that we live in him. And that last line really is a great phrase saying that Christ is all and is in all. So just to summarize things, really Paul's key message here is that we're able to cast off anything that's not of Christ in this old self. And we have to remember that we have to do that. That's in the past for us. But presently now, we have to work on putting on our new selves as we continue to be renewed each day in him. So we've got to keep allowing him to work in us and renew us daily. Thanks so much for listening, and God bless you.